I'm Courtney Wills, Entertainment Director at the Grio, and today I have the honor of talking to you all about one of the most important documentaries I've seen in recent history. Aftershock is a heartbreaking look at what's happening to women in America during their childbearing years, and specifically the hardships and inequities faced by Black women in the US. Directed and produced by Paula Eiselt and Tonya Lee, Aftershock takes a look at the maternal health crisis in this country. Hi, ladies.
Hi,
Hi, Courtney. It's great to see you.
great to be here.
It is great to see you too, and I am still reeling from watching Aftershock. I've seen it twice, and I think that it is so important, and I'm so grateful to both of you for bringing this incredibly important subject to light. Talk to me a little bit about why now was the right time for this documentary.
Well, I would start by saying that Aftershock, why now? Why Aftershock? Why now? Well, for the last 25 years, the maternal mortality rates in the United States have been going up. For me personally, in the last, I don't know, 5 to 7 years, I'd been thinking about how to really approach telling this story about the high rates of maternal mortality in the United States. And so I feel like it's ever present. The numbers are continue to go up right now. And so the world needs to understand that the United States really does have an issue in maternal mortality, that there are things that we can do to make it better for all women in the United States. And we need to be having this conversation right now to improve the birthing outcomes for Black women and ultimately all women in the United States.
Aftershock delivers some staggering statistics, some inarguable facts about the maternal morbidity rate in this country for all women and especially for Black women. But it also goes beyond the statistics, beyond the stats, and taps into the real life effect that this crisis has on families and children in the US. I think that the fact that you follow two men who are fighting to change this terrible crisis really was important because oftentimes I think that maternal issues are considered women's issues, and they're not. They affect everyone in the community. Um, why was your approach to go with two men who have lost their loved ones to this tragedy?
I think, Courtney, everything you're saying is about focuses on lived experience. And as you started, there's these staggering stats and facts, but all of that is not a story. The people who are left behind is the story. Um, and for these women and for women dying in childbirth, their families are the ones left behind. So that's the place where we started. It's the people who are left, and whether it's a partner, it's the children, of course, it's the parents, it's the families. Um, and these men, these amazing men, were the ones, of course, most directly affected. So that was the place to begin.
And the only thing I'd add to that is that often when people talk about Black women birthing, and especially this issue, um, the narrative is about Black women, not taking care of themselves. It seems like they're on their own out here in the world having children. And we really wanted to show and highlight the fact that Black birthing people are part of families, are part of communities, and that when a person is lost from childbirth complications, her family and her community are devastated by it. And whether you know it or not, we all are impacted by those losses.
One thing this documentary did was really highlight the history of how we got here in this country, how childbirth turned into a problem that needed to be solved. And I wondered what it was like to piece together that history. And were either of you as surprised as I was to learn just how far back this framing of childbirth in this way goes?
Yeah, I think especially with midwives, the marketing campaign against midwives and specifically Black midwives seems to be one of the most affecting marketing campaigns in history. You mentioned the word midwife today, and people are like, "Oh, so like, they bristle. They think you're getting subpar care. You're gonna go give birth like an animal somewhere, like that. That's like the reaction. And really, it's the opposite. Midwives were giving amazing care, especially to Black women, and that was taken from them, and they were completely vilified till this day. So I think this country is that marketing campaign is still being perpetuated in the system. It is not something that just happened historically. That's where it started, but the system continues to just perpetuate, and we're the only Western country in the world that's doing that.
Yeah, and I just add, it's America, this is my country, but it is complex, as we all know. And so when you ask if I am I surprised that our healthcare system is based on a racist premise of taking the knowledge from Black midwives, usurping that, and then vilifying them. I mean, we look at what's happening with January 6th, where we're being told what we saw didn't happen. It's exactly the same thing. It's like you took what midwives did, you took their knowledge, you took their skill, and then you say they're dirty and disgusting. I mean, this is we see it over and over again when it comes to the history of this country. And I think the good news is that we're in a place now where we can get the information out there. We can start talking about how the system got set up, and then we can really start talking about how we can make it better for all of us. And again, I think we're always trying to make America live up to her promise of what it should be.
Yes.
And I think that's what our hope is for birthing people going forward, that we can figure out how to make it better.
There were so many moments while watching this documentary where I was in tears. Sometimes I was heartbroken because I knew that this woman that I was watching plan for the arrival of her baby, I knew that she wasn't going to make it before we got to that point in the film. There were times where I was devastated watching her partner or her mother, mourning her. But then there were also times where I was crying tears of joy. And that, in particular, was when we got to see some of the solution or some of this potential solution in action. You all followed a childbirth done at a birthing center instead of a hospital with care from a midwife, and the joy on that mother's face when she saw her baby and said thank you. I was literally not okay for an hour. It was so emotional. And of course, like so many others, I was taken back to my experience with childbirth. And I could absolutely relate to feeling like this was an experience that was not in my control, and that other people, mainly white people and mainly men, told me how that was going to go. And so I think whether or not you've lost someone in childbirth or from a resulting complication of childbirth, I think all women in America can relate to that feeling that their childbirth experience is not their own. And I don't think that that's even unique to Black women. And so I wondered how much of your own experiences within your family and things that you have witnessed yourselves went into informing, that kind of narrative.
Yeah, for me, I wanted to tell this story initially because of my own experiences. I have 4 children, thank God, but I've had very traumatic pregnancies and experiences, and myself was not seen and heard, and suffered the consequences of that, of losing a pregnancy and later on. So it was something, this is very close to me. And then when in 20 end of 2017, journalists started telling the story of the lost mothers in this country, and I started reading more and realizing that this didn't just happen to me, and actually it's happening much more to Black women. And that's really how I personally came into the story, and really wanted to shed light on that and dig deep into that.
Yeah, and for me, Courtney, I think that one of the things that the film that I really appreciate about our film is Felicia, the woman that you mentioned who has the birthing experience. She is so wise in the way that she approaches figuring out how to determine what is best for her. And for me in my practice, because I've grown children now, I think I gave over my power to the system, to the doctors. I figured they knew better. I was just going to follow and do what they told me. I have a 27-year-old daughter who today has a higher chance of dying from childbirth complications than I did. And so as I look at this film now, what I realize, having gone through this journey of making this film, like she doesn't have to turn it over. Like there are options, there are choices, there are different kinds of ways to birth. Yes, we want a doctor in case there's a problem, for sure. But also maybe having a midwife integrated into that practice could be really good for her. And maybe a doula would be really great for her. So for me, this film has really allowed me to see what the opportunities are out there, and hopefully for my children and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren, they will be more empowered in their birthing experiences going forward.
Yes. What was the most startling fact that your research revealed during this project? What really just floored both of you?
So much.
It's a great question.
I think two things. First, the VBAC calculator.
Ooh.
For me, I mean, uh, is appalling. And it just shows the racism that is literally built into the system, designed that way. It's a part of, it's not even, it's beyond interpersonal. It is part of the meat of the system, and it's obviously not, isolated to just the VBAC calculator. There are other racist calculators like that in other, fields of medicine, and so that just seeing that in real time and how those numbers affect lives from just putting something into an algorithm of how you can destroy someone's life based on typing a number into a computer, that is chilling to me.
And for me, I would say, not that I maybe not that I was really surprised, but in the number of people that we spoke with who were birthing people, interfacing with doctors, we often talk about implicit bias, but the reality is a lot of it is very explicit. People are very explicitly biased and racist when dealing with Black people. They assume things about who we are and treat us according to that assumption. And so that to me was really striking.
Yes, there were so many striking things illuminated in this documentary. At one point, you all focus on, I think it was Tulsa, correct?
Mhm. Yep.
And someone says this is like the worst place that you can have a child, and that Black women account for, I think, 10% of the births, but 20%
Mhm.
of the maternal deaths there. And so when you have places where, Tulsa, it's no secret, it is steeped in racism, has been um, forever. But then you have the racism, you're able to draw a direct line between,
Absolutely.
yeah, enduring racist practices and deaths. Not a roundabout line, not maybe this was linked, like the direct result of the racism employed
Yeah,
here are these women are dead and these children do not have mothers.
yeah.
In 2021, it's still mind boggling that we need Serena Williams, arguably the greatest athlete on the planet, to say her doctors did not listen to her when she was having a child, for people to feel validated, for people to feel like, you know, I thought that I was being treated, I thought I that these people were being racist, but I wasn't sure. But it takes a superstar like that in many cases to give validity to this argument that's been here this entire time. And I wondered, Now that we have, what I hope this documentary will be is a tool, a real tool to educate people, to shine a light on the fact that this is not in our heads. This is not isolated to Tulsa. This is not isolated to women who don't take care of themselves. Serena Williams was not a one off. I feel like this is some real proof, and that gives me hope. And at the same time, like you said, Tonya, in this day and age, proof isn't necessarily, as powerful as it used to be.
Yeah.
So when you tackle a subject so monumental like this, what is the real hope? Like, what is your realistic hope for change as a result of this?
Well, look, I think the realistic hope for me is that we ultimately in the United States do end up with integrated midwifery care into our maternal health practice. I hope that doctors are able to, like our Dr. Neil Shaw in the film, look at how they can work together to provide the best kind of care models for their patients. And honestly, for Black women, as you said, Cortney, I hope this film illuminates for them that you're not crazy. People aren't treating you right, and you need to demand that they listen to you when you are feeling pain and when something is not right, until you get the type of care that you need and deserve.
Yes. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of making this documentary, because you did this during a pandemic. That couldn't be easy for any filmmaker, but you guys were in hospital rooms. You were in, very sensitive situations. So what was that like, just as filmmakers and as creators, to have to confront the pandemic and still get this done?
It was a lot.
A challenge.
But you have to use your limitations to be more creative and figure it out. And the pandemic hit, and we could have just paused, like everyone, and that would have been a very valid thing to do. I also had a baby, like, right at the beginning of the pandemic, so there were many reasons to just kind of put it aside. But we believe so strongly in the characters in this film and in their stories, and just couldn't do that. Like, we had started this and we had to push through. One of the first things we did was provide everyone with iPhones, and have them start documenting themselves. So we were still getting footage, and that actually became another creative approach that gave even more intimacy that we may not have hadn't we all been locked down. So we had to think like that, and we got amazing results, and also we're able to empower our film collaborators, our subjects who are our collaborators, to film themselves, and put their actual lens in the film. So that felt like a really great thing, and the results of it, we used a lot of that in the film.
And then also just regarding the hospitals, I mean, we were just really fortunate that we had great partners. I will say, I think that these medical institutions know there's an issue and they're trying to figure out and grapple with it. And they understood that we were trying to make the film the best way we could. And so we navigated and negotiated. And when they allowed us to come in, we were ready to come in. When we couldn't, we just waited.
Wow. How did you go about finding, and her name is escaping me, but the woman whose birth we got to watch in the birthing center?
Oh,
What is her name?
Felicia.
Felicia. How did you get in contact with Felicia during her pregnancy, and what was that conversation like to say, "Can we film this and put it in a movie?"
I love that you asked that question because when we went down to Tulsa, we met a woman named Labrisa Williams, who's also briefly in the film, who is the head of the Tulsa Birth Equity Initiative. And that initiative is set up to bring doulas to women in the community. And so through Labrisa's doula program, because as you also meet Ashley, who is Felicia's doula, we met Ashley, and through Ashley, we met Felicia. And it was really, I really appreciate Felicia and her husband, Paul, allowing us into a process to be pregnant during COVID. They were not from Tulsa. They had to figure out how to navigate a place that they were not from. and having a first child. And Felicia was just very open and honest about thinking through what the right situation was going to be for her, and also talking about the concerns and fears that she had and the hopes and dreams that she had. Just really a wonderful spirit, and really appreciated her just being open for all of us, right?
And I'll just add, it was, as you mentioned, Courtney, it was so important to us to show solutions in another way, that this is not a doom and gloom story. This is an issue that we can fix. Um, in healthcare in this country, this can happen. And Felicia is the promise and is what every woman should have. So it was really important to show that, to actually show that these are the steps that can be taken to do something about this. We don't want people walking out of this film scared, afraid to have babies. We want them to feel empowered with information that they're going to have and deserve a beautiful birth. So we are blessed with Felicia and Paul and baby Lily, who's like the most beautiful baby
Adorable.
that I've ever seen. And
Adorable.
I love my children, but she came out perfect.
I have a similar question about the men who you followed. I mean, what was it about these two men and their stories of loss that made them the right subjects for this documentary? Because sadly, you probably had so many to choose from.
Yeah, I will say, like, so Shawnee, who is Shamani's mother, um, she was the first person really to come on board and was started this link with all the characters. So Shawnee is the heart. She's for everyone for this film. She's the matriarch. So when we met Shawnee, that was it. It was like she's the one, and then Omari, of course, is Shamani, her daughter's surviving partner. So that's how we met Omari, and during the pandemic, it was April, mid-April is when Amber Isaac, Amber Rose Isaac lost her life, and Omari had reached out to Bruce, and they let us know that this had happened, and that's how we got to Bruce. So it's really this brotherhood, this, as Omari says, this horrible club that nobody wants to be in. But it's through their own journeys that we meet these other people. So it's sticking with our core Shawnee, who really led us to everyone.
One of the things I love, I really love is, Amari, Bruce, Sam. I mean, these are Charles. These are men who, I mean, they're amazing men. Clearly, they loved their partners and wives that passed away, and they love their communities, and and the fact that they are able to just become activated and be so selfless in a time that I can imagine they just wanted to turn internal, was such a gift. I look at them and I'm like, oh my God, they're so beautiful. They're beautiful men, and they're beautiful fathers, and they care about their communities. And it was just a joy and a pleasure to get to know them and follow them.
It was clear to me whether it was um, Shamani's mother, like you mentioned, or Felicia having her baby, everyone in this film was fighting. Like everyone in this film was fighting against this crisis. And there was something just intrinsically empowering about that, because I think that this subject matter feels very helpless, and really felt very helpless to me until I saw this documentary. And while it's an important subject matter that makes a great documentary, it was also just incredibly well done. I know that you worked with Dawn Porter, who was a producer on this project, and I always like to ask her what she left on the cutting room floor, because when something is this good and this full, I know that there was more.
Oh, there was a
Yes.
lot that we left painfully.
Whole storylines.
Yeah, really, really hard, really, really hard choices that we had to make. There's a whole other film that has been left on the floor.
Yeah.
of wonderful stories, other people that we followed, other birthing people that we followed. So yes, there was a lot.
Yeah. Other birth stories.
And lastly, if there's one message that you hope people take from seeing Aftershock, what is that?
That birth doesn't have to be the way it is now. We need a cultural shift um, that can change it for everyone. And I'll just say back to the midwives for a second. The decimation and the vilification of Black midwives, the racism there poisoned the well for everyone. It started it took midwives out of this country, and look where we are because of that. So I want a lot of white people to see that. Look what it does. It's if you don't care about Black people, it's gonna happen to you. It starts a machine and it's poison. So I hope people see that.
And I would say we can do better. We can do better, and the question becomes, do we have the will to do it? We can have better birth outcomes in this country if we want to. And the good news is we're seeing legislation that is happening that may ultimately affect us. So let's see where we are in another 25 years.
Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you so much for this magnificent, urgently important project, Aftershock.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Courtney.